I'm Andy Schmuckler. Um, I call myself sometimes a man on a mission, having to do with a picture of the forces that are at work in the human world, and a picture I think can help save American democracy from the force of fascism, and really more lifelong, a picture that I think can help save human civilization. I'm not going to try to go too deep into the big picture this time. The topic for this is in the battle between democracy and fascism, where's corporate America? And I think that I don't, I'm sort of surprised sometimes that I don't see people talking more about um, these huge components of the American civilization that we call corporations. We have, I don't know what the figures are about what proportion of the American economy uh, is run by corporations of X size or bigger. But I think that there's no doubt but that the economic power of corporate America is huge. More troublingly, the political power of corporate America is also huge. And we got things like Citizens United, in part to thank for that, but not just Citizens United. The Supreme Court, since Buckley versus Vallejo, has been loath to say that it's necessary that the inequalities of wealth that exist in a democratic society not translate into inequalities of political power, but they surely do. And Citizens United just opened the floodgates more for that. There's also the sense that I had growing up that our large corporations were basically consistent with living in a humane society. I don't mean the Humane Society. No animals need apply. I mean that you could drive a Ford or a Chevy and not feel like you were contributing to, the fascism, a fascist force that wasn't all that visible in America anyway. Of course, there was Henry Ford back in the day, but that's a whole other story. But Robert Reich has written about corporate America back in the 50s, that there were corporate statesmen, that the corporations in that period felt that they had some responsibility, not just to their own themselves and the organization and the people who owned the stock, but also into stakeholders, as people said, to the workers and to the wider public. Reich thinks that that's disappeared. I remember Ronald Reagan saying something like, the only responsibility a business has, or a corporation, I don't remember his language, was essentially to maximize profits. That's the ideology of the marketplace. It's an ideology I did my best to dismantle in a book that was published by SUNY Press in 1992. Let me get the illusion of choice, how the market economy shapes our destiny. As I said, that's from SUNY Press, and it's still in print. That as much as I love the market, being a son of an economist, got educated at my father's knee about supply and demand and all the rationality and efficiencies that markets can create. I recognize that there's a need for not just everybody, like Adam Smith said, to pursue their own self-interest. But even if corporations were to pursue only their self-interest. And I think we are in fact in a situation where we have powerful economic and political actors who embrace the ideology and entitle themselves to live according to the ideology, that all they got to do is make as much money as they can. And Adam Smith was saying, and as if by an invisible hand, everybody gets led to do what's best for the whole. And there's a lot of ways in which that's true, but boy, there sure are also a lot of ways in which they're not true. And particularly when you've got, unlike with Adam Smith's pin manufacturing metaphor, when you've got companies that have market share, market power. In other words, they're so big that they're not at the mercy of market forces, but can dictate them. But even if we say that we expect corporations to look out only for themselves, how would we expect them to behave in a situation like we have in America right now? A situation where we have an upcoming election in which, say, unlike elections of other eras, it's not between, let's say, a Republican Party that's more representative of the world of big business and a Democratic Party that's more affiliated with the AFL-CIO, and now we got the democracy versus fascism is the name of this situation. And I've got a mixture of thoughts about where things are or where things should be, even if we grant the premise that corporations are just out for themselves. And I don't like granting that premise, by the way. On the one hand, I tend to think that the force of fascism and the force of plutocracy in America are very much interconnected. The plutocrats are trying to take power from the people and give it to the money system, the money power. And they're trying to take wealth from average Americans and have, by tax structures and regulatory matters, end up with regular people having less than is just, and they're having more than is just. And we've seen in places like, Germany in 1933 whatever, that the corporate power and the fascist power can make compatible bedfellows. Though it did turn out in Germany that they weren't as able to control Hitler as they expected. I don't know a whole lot about how their thinking changed from 1933 to 1939 and into the war, about whether they had made any wrong choices about being in bed with the Nazis. But there's another side of this that might push the corporate world in a different direction if they're wise. There's a woman, I didn't get her name, I didn't get what she was a professor of, but I did get that her field was studying autocratic regimes, I think was. And she described, for example, what happened in Hungary, where there's a semi-fascist regime, pretty illiberal democracy, let's put it as it calls itself. Orban, the guy who met with Trump down in Mar-a-Lago recently, she described how he was able to, as he consolidated power in an autocratic, fascistic way, he was able to push corporations around in such a way that he ended up having a whole lot of power in his own hand and destroying some industries to get it. And she also made the point, which is consistent with other things that I've believed to be true when I've studied um, capitalism, the market economy, however you want to call it, in different places, which is that the rule of law is important for the development of a modern economy, a corporate system, that if people are confident that, for example, contracts can be enforced and you can count on power to be used in predictable ways, that is very good for business. And to fail to have that kind of rule of law, and fascism is not real good at the rule of law. You know, the fascist powers are always willing to do whatever they damn please. And like Orban, for themselves, they're not reliable. They're not reliable friends, and they're not reliably going to play by the rules. So, according to that, if you're corporate America, you would look around and you would say, we've done rather well in this American democracy. We don't want it to change. And then you would, what I would like to see is that corporations would, and I don't know, whether it be individual corporations or industries or groups of them that go together and put out ads or have press conferences. We need to tell the American people that our democracy is now threatened by a fascistic force, as I've been talking about in a lot of previous videos. I'm just assuming that people recognize that that's the case, for this case. And I would like to think that we would have decent citizens, people who have a sufficient value of America's foundational system, the sense of a regime that is gets its just powers from from the consent of the people, that conducts free and fair elections so that the will of the people can express itself. But maybe they don't want that. Maybe they think that they can do business with Trump. I mean, he got them $2 trillion in an unnecessary tax cut. Maybe that's the way they're thinking. Maybe that's really short term. I would like to think that they would be smart enough to know that you don't undo the system that made the United States the world's #1 economy for the whole American century that we've just been through. But I don't know that that's true. I also recognize that there's a lack of moral fiber in the corporate system as it has developed. People like Andrew Carnegie, made a fortune. He may have been a robber baron. I don't know enough about it. I think there was a lot of predatory stuff. I don't think he played very, very nice with any potential competitors. But he was a human being. He made himself a huge fortune. And then that fortune he dedicated to a whole lot of things. I used to live in the West, and I've been to a lot of public libraries. And there's a plaque saying that that basically this Carnegie money went all over to small towns, and I don't know about big cities or whatever, creating public libraries because he believed in democracy. And he wanted an educated American public that they could go to a library and get books to educate itself. And, now we've got the Ford Foundation, not that Henry Ford probably would approve. We got the Rockefeller Foundation. We got Vanderbilt University. These individuals seem to have a vision of what they wanted to leave to the world. And we've got some individuals now like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. They know that they can't take it with them, and they know they don't need billions and billions, and they're choosing things to do that to make the world a better place. Fascism is not the way to get to a better world. It's a better place. But on the other hand, we aren't in that age of the robber barons anymore. And we don't have just individuals like Bill Gates, and we got whole corporate organizations that have been evolving in a particular system with their own internal dynamics. And one of the things that I've said in writing and in video, you can look for a videotape on my YouTube library about Who Kills for Money is the name of the videotape. And what I show is that every industry that has found itself in a position where they've discovered that what's making them rich is killing people, or worse, killing the planet. In every case that I'm aware of, and I've asked a friend of mine who's big in that kind of a world, in every case, the corporate industry has chosen to kill for money. The ones in order, I think in order, the asbestos industry definitely tried to hide what they knew so they could keep making money without having to worry about the workers and communities they were killing. The tobacco industry, which from the Surgeon General's report in 1964 until what was depicted in the 1990s in that movie, The Insider, they did everything they could to create doubt where they knew they were killing people. But they wanted to sow doubt so that people would keep on smoking and smoking and making them rich. And now the worst of all is the fossil fuel industry, where they knew back in the late 70s, around the same time as I found out that these greenhouse gases were going to be a problem that we needed to curtail our transformation of the atmosphere, or we were going to heat up the planet and precipitate some really unpleasant things. But they hid that too, and there are a couple of really good books about how they deliberately set up propaganda to become merchants of doubt, where there wasn't any doubt. So they were willing to kill for money and even to inflict perhaps it could even, I mean, I don't know how bad it could be. I don't know if it could be so bad as to lead to the collapse of civilization. We're already dealing with a lot, and we know we're in the early stages of getting deeper and deeper into all these. And some of these are vicious cycles that'll feed on each other. And the fossil fuel industry has done everything it could to prevent us from behaving rationally and wisely, and as if we really cared about the well-being of the generations to come, even our own grandchildren. So there are problems in the corporate system, and when they learn to give themselves permission to act like Ronald, that case, not Donald this time, Ronald Reagan said about just make more money, make a profit. That's how you best serve society. Well, that's not true when it comes to buying a political party that will cripple the society, make it impossible for steps to be taken as they did for 30 some years to deal with the problem that was emerging. So the whole field of climate scientists were clamoring to spread the alarm that something needed to be done. So the limit to what we might expect from corporate America, if they're willing to care that little about the common good, then it really just boils down to, do they think they can ride a Trumpian tiger without the tiger eating them up? Well, it's not going to be the tiger's not going to be Trump for long. But the thing is, once you've got a fascist regime, are you going to ever be able to restore democracy after that, or you just get yourself a successor fascist regime? The totalitarian regime that Lenin founded was able to go through a whole succession of leadership. Lenin died in 24, Stalin died in 54, I think. And then we got a succession of other people, and finally Gorbachev, and then the end of the Soviet Union. So the question is really the whole future of the country in a situation where democracy, once lost, is not easily regained. I've wondered, for example, about whether the corporate world is a unit. It's not in anybody's interests, except for the short-term profit maximizing issue of the fossil interest of the fossil fuel industry. It's not in anybody's interest for this climate thing to get to be a worse and worse catastrophe. But I've noticed that none of the rest of the corporate world, I mean, not everybody's making money off of what the fossil fuel industry is doing, killing for money. What about all the other industries? Why aren't they telling the American people, hey, don't listen to these merchants of doubt. We really got to do something about this. So if that's who they are, then I wonder, is there some kind of a gentleman's agreement among these guys? We won't get in the way of you wrecking the world for your enrichment if you don't get in the way of ours. Maybe. There's this war against regulation, as if the market by itself makes all the right decisions, which is what the illusion of choice refutes. So maybe they all have this common interest in keeping government from being able to do what it needs to do to protect the greater good. I don't know. And if there is a potential to get at least some major corporate figures to take the stage and talk to the American people, because a lot of people have a lot of respect for people who are rich. If you're so smart, why ain't you rich? That's a line that I've played with more than once in my book, Fool's Gold, The Fate of Values in a World of Goods. People think that Donald Trump, when they thought he was a really wonderful, hugely successful, very rich billionaire businessman, which was the image that he sold, a con man that he is, that was apparently, at least some people say, a big part of his selling. So if people like the head of GE or the head of GM or the head of General Mills, to stick with, and the head of Gee Whiz were to get together and get on a stage and say to the American people, we want you to know ... vote this way, because American democracy is what's at stake in this. And a vote for Joe Biden turns out to be what's required at this point in our history if we're going to continue to enjoy the blessings that we have in this great democratic capitalistic society. Well, I don't know if anybody's going to do that, if anybody would. Now, I frequent some liberal websites. I appear pretty regularly on Daily Cost with my own writings. And I encounter people who are very upset with the mainstream media and who interpret what they don't like that appears in the New York Times and other newspapers. They think that the mainstream media is getting it wrong because they're corrupt. And I always wonder, well, I usually can agree that the media have really fallen short during this 20-year period where I've been out there trying to raise the alarm about the rise of fascism. I wrote a piece back in called the dog that didn't bark, because I see the whole American body politic, the conservatives, the liberals, and the press, and the people all having failed. And the press was the dog that didn't bark. That I thought during the W administration, this was one of the biggest stories in America in history. And I listed, the big stories like the Civil War and World War II and the Great Depression. And this one was the fourth huge story, and the press wasn't saying it, that fascism is rising on the political right. I believe that they were not understanding it, that it was a lack of perception, that they thought it was still politics as usual, but it had changed, and they didn't understand that it had changed. I remember in 2012, a couple of very good journalistic, political types, guy named Norman Ornstein at the American Enterprise Institute. He's not, a right winger like AEI is a little bit. And a fellow named, I think, Thomas Mann, M-A-N-N, at the Brookings Institution came out with something about, it turns out that it isn't both sides are doing it. The dysfunction isn't because both sides are doing this and that, and we got this poll. No, the Republican Party has become an outlier in American history, and it characterized some of the things it was doing that was not part of the American norm. And people made such a big deal about how they had this breakthrough insight. It wasn't both sides, it was on one. And I had been, I have my own desires for a little bit of recognition, because I had been saying that for 8 years. 8 years is a long time. And these guys got lionized for saying something in 2012 that was visible and before that, long before that. It reminds me of the politicians who were prematurely right about Vietnam. If you were right later, that could be politically beneficial. But if you realized earlier that this war was going to be a real mess, that it wasn't going to achieve America's purposes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you got politically punished. Okay, well, anyway, I didn't get punished. I just never got credit, and I like getting credit when it's due anyhow. But we've got a Republican Party that has had a huge amount of corporate support and has reaped great benefits from that the corporate system has reaped considerable benefits, like the $2 trillion tax cut that the Republicans happily passed, like paralyzing us from making us change our energy as quickly and prudently as we can to minimize the catastrophe of climate change. But the press did not notice that something different was happening in the American political system, that one of our two political parties was getting taken over by a really unusual force that was increasingly visible as being destructive and really not respectful of the rule of law or of the American constitutional system. Is the press in cahoots with that force? Or was it just like, the Democratic Party and the rest of liberal America just wasn't able to see what was in front of their faces, didn't recognize that something was getting to be different from what we were used to the point where we now have something like Trump versus Biden. That's a completely different kind of contest at a completely different level from Eisenhower versus Stevenson, or even Reagan versus Carter, or the first Bush versus Dukakis. We have moved into a different regime on the right. And I don't know whether the people who are complaining about the New York Times, the New York Times publishes a lot of stuff that's It helps. Anybody who reads it can see very clearly what's going on. So when they publish something which leads to somebody on Daily Kos writing a piece on, the corruption of the press, the mainstream media is failing because it's in cahoots with this fascist force, I don't know what to think. But I think pressure should be brought to bear, maybe in public, first in private, maybe in public, to see if we can get some really strong voices from corporate America telling the American people what's essential for them to know. If we all share a commitment to the preservation of American democracy. Thank you. I'm Andy Schmuckler, a man on a mission. I'll be back on Saturday morning. I'll probably be back with something more today, but I'll be back on Saturday morning to live stream at 11 a.m., just like I did today at 11 a.m. On this platform. And I will have a new set of topics to show what our situation is here in America, here on this planet, and in particular in this current important battle on which not only the future of American democracy, but also through that, the survivability of human civilization in the generations to come. It really matters whether the United States is a leader of the free world or allied with the fascist dictator that launched that unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. It really matters. Thank you.